The stars disappear when you're in the Valley of the Silent Gods. Welcome to the Wilderness Protocol. We look to the stars for constants. Polaris, the North Star. The familiar, comforting shapes of the constellations. They are our celestial anchors, our map to the infinite. We believe that no matter how lost we are on Earth, the sky above remains a fixed, predictable, and eternal truth. This belief is a comforting illusion. My name is Dr. Samuel Aris. I am an astrophysicist. I was part of a team sent to a remote, high-altitude desert to study atmospheric clarity for a new telescope array. We chose the location for its pristine, light pollution-free skies. We went there to look at the stars. We did not know that in that valley the stars were also looking at us. The locals have a name for it. They call it Atimpa, the Valley of the Silent Gods. They have a simple protocol for surviving it: don't be there after sundown. Because in the Valley of the Silent Gods the stars disappear, and you are left alone in the dark with whatever has taken them. The Atacama Desert in Chile is the driest place on Earth. It is a landscape so alien, so utterly devoid of life, that NASA uses it to test its Mars rovers. It is a world of rock and salt and a silence so profound it feels like a physical presence. It also has the clearest, most stable atmosphere on the planet, making it a paradise for astronomers. Our mission was simple. A small team of 3, myself, a pragmatic atmospheric scientist named Dr. Lena Petrova, and our guide, a quiet, weathered local named Mateo, were to spend a month in a hyper-remote, high-altitude valley, taking atmospheric readings. The goal was to confirm its suitability for the new Magellan Overwhelmingly Large Telescope. The valley itself was not on any official map. It was a recent discovery from a satellite survey, a perfect, bowl-shaped valley nestled between 3 towering, volcanic peaks. The local astronomical community had nicknamed it the Observatory for its seemingly perfect conditions. Mateo, our guide, used the older, local name. Atimpa, he'd said, his voice a low rumble as he drove us in his rattling 4x4. It means the place where the sky is wiped clean. I thought it was a beautiful poetic name. I did not at the time understand that it was a literal description. We set up our small, self-sufficient research camp in the center of the valley. It was a stark, beautiful place. The ground was a floor of cracked, dark volcanic rock. The air was thin, cold, and so dry it felt like it was pulling the moisture from your skin. During the day, the sky was a deep, impossible cobalt blue. Mateo was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of wrinkles carved by a lifetime under the harsh desert sun. On our first evening, as we were setting up our portable telescope to do a preliminary calibration, he gave us his one and only piece of advice. "You must be back in the tents before the last light leaves the sky, doctors," he said, his dark eyes serious. "You do not look at the sky from this valley after dark." "But Mateo," Lena had said with a laugh, "that's why we're here. To look at the night sky. It's supposed to be the clearest in the world." Mateo had just shaken his head slowly. "There are some things that are clear and there are some things that are empty. This place is for the sun. The night belongs to the silenciosos, the silent gods. You do not want their attention." We thanked him for the warning and dismissed it as local superstition, the charming folklore of a man who lived his life by the old ways. It was our first and most critical mistake. That first night we were like children in a candy store. As darkness fell, the sky ignited. The Milky Way was not a faint milky band. It was a brilliant, shimmering river of light, so dense with stars it looked solid. We took our first set of atmospheric readings, and the data was even better than we had hoped. 0 humidity, 0 light pollution, a perfect, stable window into the universe. We worked for hours, taking photographs, calibrating our spectrometer. It was around midnight when Lena was the first to notice it. "That's strange," she said, peering at her laptop, which was connected to our atmospheric sensor array. "The upper atmosphere temperature is dropping. Rapidly. Way faster than any predictive model." I looked at my own readings. She was right. The temperature at an altitude of 50 kilometers was plummeting. At the same time, my spectrometer was picking up trace amounts of an unidentifiable element in the upper atmosphere. It had a spectral signature I had never seen before. Probably just an equipment glitch, I said, though a small knot of unease was forming in my stomach. And then it happened. I was looking through the eyepiece of our main telescope, focused on the Andromeda Galaxy. It was a breathtaking sight, a spiral of 100 billion stars, 2.5 million light-years away. One moment it was there, a perfect, beautiful swirl of ancient light. The next it was gone. I blinked, thinking my eye had watered, that I had lost focus. I looked again. The space where Andromeda should have been was now a patch of perfect, featureless, and absolute black. "Lena," I said, my voice suddenly tight. "I've lost Andromeda." "What do you mean you've lost it?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "It's one of the brightest objects in the sky. Just move the scope." "I don't mean I've lost it," I said, my voice a low, horrified whisper. "I mean it's gone. It's not there anymore." She came over and looked through the eyepiece. She was silent for a long time. "Okay," she said finally, her voice strained. "Okay, there's a simple explanation. A dark nebula. A rogue cloud of interstellar dust has moved between us and the galaxy. It's rare, but it happens." It was a logical explanation. It was a scientific explanation. It was the only thing that could keep the terror at bay. But then the star to the left of where Andromeda had been vanished. Then a whole cluster to the right. One by one, like candles being snuffed out in a vast, dark room, the stars began to disappear. We scrambled, moving the telescope across the sky. It was happening everywhere. Entire constellations were being erased. The familiar, comforting shape of Orion's belt. Gone. The Southern Cross. Gone. The brilliant, blue-white light of Sirius. Gone. Within the space of 10 minutes, the sky, which had been a brilliant, dense carpet of a billion stars, was now a terrifying, suffocating, and absolute black void. Not a single star remained. Not the faint glow of a distant galaxy. Not even the moon. There was nothing. We stood there, two modern scientists, two believers in the immutable laws of the cosmos, under a sky that had been wiped clean. The silence from the desert around us was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. A profound cosmic silence. And then, our equipment began to scream. Every sensor we had went haywire at the same instant. The magnetometer needle spun wildly. The atmospheric sensors flatlined. The radio telescope began emitting a high-pitched, agonizing shriek of pure, white static. And my laptop, connected to the spectrometer, flashed a single line of text on the screen, over and over. "Error. Unknown element detected. Error. Unknown element detected." "What is happening?" Lena cried, her voice a thin, terrified wail against the shriek of the static. I looked at the spectrometer reading. The element it had detected in the upper atmosphere, it was no longer a trace amount. The concentration was now 100%. The entire upper atmosphere of the valley had been replaced by this unknown substance. The substance that had, apparently, just eaten the stars. We were no longer under the Earth's sky. We were under something else's. We were inside a bubble, a pocket of reality that had been severed from the rest of the universe. And then the final, most terrifying event of that first night occurred. From the center of the black, empty void directly above us, a single new light appeared. It was not a star. It was a soft, pale, and milky white light, and it began to descend slowly, silently, towards the valley floor. It looked for all the world like a single, colossal, unblinking eye, opening in the void and looking down at us. We didn't wait to see what it was. We abandoned our multi-million-dollar equipment. We scrambled into our tent, a flimsy nylon shelter against a horror of cosmic proportions, and we zipped it shut. We huddled together in the darkness, listening to the shrieking static from our abandoned equipment and the frantic, terrified pounding of our own hearts. We had not listened to Mateo's warning. We had stayed out after dark. We had looked up, and the silent gods now knew we were here. We spent the rest of that first night in a state of primal terror, huddled in the dark of the tent. The shrieking of the static from our equipment outside finally died around 3 a.m., plunging the valley into that same profound, ear-pressuring silence from before. The silence of an empty sky. We didn't dare to look outside. We just waited for the dawn, praying it would come. It did. As the first, weak, gray light began to filter through the fabric of the tent, we heard a sound. A soft, shuffling footstep outside. We froze. Doctors. It was Mateo's voice. Calm. Steady. It is morning. The sun has returned. You are safe now. We scrambled to the tent flap and ripped it open. Mateo was standing there, a thermos of coffee in his hand, his face etched with a deep, sorrowful pity. The sky above was a brilliant, familiar blue. What happened? Lena stammered, her face pale and drawn. The stars, they were gone. Yes, Mateo said simply, pouring coffee into 3 tin cups. He handed one to each of us. His hand was perfectly steady. They are always gone at night. I warned you. The silenciosos, they do not like to be watched. He looked at the wreckage of our expensive equipment. The screens all cracked, the antennas bent. They do not like your loud machines either, he added quietly. They find the noise impolite. We spent the day in a state of shock, trying to reconcile the impossible events of the night with the calm, logical, sunlit world of the day. All of our electronic equipment was dead. Fried. Useless. Our satellite phone, our GPS, our data recorders. All of it, just a note, plastic and metal. We were cut off. We have to leave, Lena said, her voice a strained whisper. We have to report this. Mateo just shook his head slowly. The truck will not start, he said. None of them ever do after a night like that. And you cannot walk out of here. Not yet. You have been noticed. To try and leave now would be unwise. It would be seen as an insult. So what do we do? I asked, my own voice sounding thin and weak. We follow the protocol, Mateo said. We are quiet. We are respectful. We stay inside after sundown. And we wait. We wait for them to lose interest in you. For the next week, we lived in a state of surreal, sun-drenched dread. During the day, the valley was a paradise. The sky was blue, the sun was warm, the world was normal. But we knew it was a lie. We were prisoners in a beautiful, sunlit cage, waiting for the night to fall. Each evening, just as the sun would dip below the horizon, we would retreat to our tents. And each evening, the same phenomenon would occur. The stars would wink out, one by one, until the sky was a perfect, terrifying, black void. And then the soft, pale, milky white eye would appear, hanging directly over the valley, watching. We did not look. We would huddle in our tents, trying to block out the oppressive silence, trying not to think about the single, vast, and silent God that was looking down on us. But the entity, the silencioso, was not content to just watch. It was curious. It began to interact. It started with the rocks. The valley floor was littered with small, dark, volcanic stones. On the third morning, we woke up to find that the rocks around our camp had been rearranged. They had been placed in a series of long, perfectly straight, parallel lines, all radiating outwards from our tents. It was a pattern of immense scale and perfect precision. It was a diagram, a message written in stone. The next morning, the pattern was different. The straight lines were gone, replaced by a series of massive, concentric circles with our camp at the very center. It is mapping you, Mateo said, his voice a low whisper as he looked at the new pattern. It is trying to understand your position, your geometry. The phenomena grew stranger. One night, we were awoken by a low humming sound. It was coming from outside. I peered through a small gap in the tent flap. The pale white eye in the sky was no longer just a light. It was projecting something onto the valley floor. A complex, shifting, holographic image of what looked like a city. But the architecture was all wrong. The buildings were made of flowing, organic-looking structures, and they pulsed with a soft, internal light. It was showing us a picture of its home. And then it began to show us pictures of our home. The next night, the projection was a perfect, detailed, and three-dimensional replica of the city of Paris. We could see the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe. The next night it was New York City, the Empire State Building rendered in ghostly white light. How? Lena whispered, her scientific mind reeling. How can it know these things? There are no radio signals here. No internet. It is reading you, Matteo said, his face grim. It is pulling the images from your minds. From your memories. It is learning what you are. We were no longer just being observed. We were being data mined. Our own minds were the last, unsecured network, and this silent, cosmic entity was downloading our world, one memory at a time. The breaking point for me came on the 7th night. I was lying in my tent trying to force myself to sleep, when a new image appeared in the projection outside. It was not a city. It was my childhood home. I saw it rendered in perfect, heartbreaking detail in the ghostly light. The big oak tree in the front yard where I had built a treehouse. The porch swing where my mother used to read to me. The specific pattern of cracks in the driveway. It was all there. And then a figure appeared on the porch. A woman. She was holding a book. And she was waving at me. It was my mother. She had passed away a decade ago. I felt a sob catch in my throat. It was a memory, my most precious memory, plucked from my mind and projected onto the desert floor for my own private torment. The figure of my mother smiled and she beckoned to me. Come home, Samuel, a voice whispered in my mind. It was not her voice. It was a cold, synthesized, and curious imitation. Show us more. I couldn't take it anymore. I scrambled out of the tent, my mind a storm of grief and rage. Leave us alone. I screamed at the black, empty sky, at the single, pale, watching eye. What do you want from us? The projection of my home, of my mother, vanished. The pale eye in the sky seemed to brighten, to focus. And the voice in my head replied, its tone no longer just curious, but now holding a note of something else. Something that sounded like hunger. We want the story, it whispered. All of it. We are the silent gods. We are the collectors. And you, little noisy creature, you are a library of new and interesting tales. And we intend to read you, page by page. My outburst was a catastrophic error. I had done the one thing Matteo had warned me against, the one thing the entity seemed to crave. I had engaged. I had acknowledged it. I had spoken to it directly, filling the sacred silence with my raw, noisy human emotion. The reaction was immediate. The pale, white eye in the sky pulsed once, a brilliant, blinding flash of light that turned the night-black valley into a stark, overexposed photograph for a single, terrifying instant. When my vision cleared, the world had changed. The silence was gone. It was replaced by a sound. A single, low, and profoundly deep hum that seemed to be coming from the very rock beneath our feet. It was the sound of a colossal machine powering on. And the rocks, the thousands of dark, volcanic rocks that littered the valley floor, began to move. They did not roll or slide. They rose. They levitated a few inches into the air, hovering silently, and they began to turn, to rearrange themselves. They moved with the slow, deliberate, and intelligent grace, like a vast, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle being assembled by an unseen hand. They were forming a new pattern. A new message. It is building a reply, Matteo whispered, his face ashen in the pale glow of the hovering stones. You asked it a question. Now it will give you an answer. We must not be here to receive it. The truck, Lena said, her voice a tight, panicked squeak. We have to try the truck. We ran. We scrambled from our camp, leaving our tents, our research, everything behind. We ran towards the place where Matteo had parked his old, battered 4x4, our feet crunching on the salt-encrusted ground. Behind us, the humming grew louder, the floating rocks moving faster and faster, coalescing into a new, massive, and intricate geometric shape in the center of the valley. We reached the truck. Matteo jumped into the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition. He turned it. Nothing. A dead metallic click. He tried again. Click. Click. It is no use, he said, his voice a grim whisper. They have drained it. The battery, the engine, it is just a dead shell. We were trapped. And behind us, the great stone machine had finished its work. The humming stopped. The rocks all settled back to the ground with a soft collective thump. In the center of the valley now stood a new structure. It was a perfect 20-foot-tall replica of the DNA double helix. Our double helix. Human DNA, rendered in thousands of tons of black, volcanic rock. It was an answer to my shouted question. What do you want from us? The answer was clear. It wanted our code, our blueprint, our story, written in its most fundamental language. And then the pale eye in the sky began to descend. It was no longer a soft, distant light. It was growing larger, brighter, resolving into a solid, spherical object of milky, opalescent light, and it was coming down, directly towards the stone helix. Directly towards us. Into the caves, Matteo yelled, grabbing both Lena and me by the arm and pulling us towards the base of the towering cliffs that ring the valley. Now! It is the only place it cannot see. He led us to a narrow fissure in the rock face, a dark, vertical slash that I had barely noticed before. We scrambled inside into the absolute, tomb-like blackness of the mountain's interior. We huddled together just inside the entrance, peering out at the valley. The glowing sphere, now the size of a house, hovered silently over the stone helix. A thin, ethereal tendril of light extended from the sphere and touched the top of the rock structure. The moment it made contact, the stone helix began to glow, first with a soft, blue light, and then brighter and brighter until it was a blinding incandescent white. The humming returned, a sound so powerful it shook our very bones, a sound of immense data transfer. It was downloading us. What is it doing? Lena cried, her hands over her ears. It is not a god, Matteo said, his voice full of a terrible, ancient understanding. It is the librarian, a collector, and it has just found a new interesting book. It is making a copy before it adds the original to its collection. The light from the helix was now so bright it was impossible to look at. We retreated deeper into the cave. We stayed there for the rest of the night, listening to the hum of our own biology being catalogued by a cosmic archivist. Just before dawn, the humming stopped. We crept back to the entrance of the cave. The valley was silent and dark again. The stone helix was gone, the rocks returned to their random, scattered positions. The glowing sphere was gone. And the sky was full of stars. The familiar, comforting, and beautiful constellations of our own night sky were back in their proper places. It was over. It had finished its work. It had left. We emerged from the cave, weak and trembling, into the first, cold light of dawn. We walked back to the truck. Matteo put the key in the ignition. He turned it. The engine roared to life. We drove out of that valley in silence. No one spoke. There were nothing to say. We were debriefed by the gray men in the gray suits, of course. They took our data, our samples, our statements. They told us we had experienced a rare, localized, and powerful electromagnetic phenomenon, a geomagnetic storm, which had caused our equipment failure and our shared hallucinations. They thanked us for our service and strongly, firmly advised us to never speak of what we thought we had seen. I live a quiet life now. I am no longer an astrophysicist. I cannot bear to look at the night sky. To me, it is no longer a window into the infinite. It is a piece of glass, a one-way mirror. And I know with a certainty that has become the new, terrifying constant of my life, that on the other side of that glass, a silent, patient, and utterly alien God is sitting and quietly reading the story of us. And I know that one day, when it has finished the book, it will simply turn the page. And our story will be over. Thank you for completing this observational report from the Wilderness Protocol. We look to the heavens and we feel a sense of wonder. But we must also consider that, from the other side, something else may be looking back with a very different kind of wonder. The wonder of a biologist discovering a new, interesting, and ultimately disposable form of life. If this protocol has served as a necessary warning, please consider liking this video and subscribing for further celestial and terrestrial reports. Look up at the stars. But be wary. You never know who or what might be looking down.